All right, so we are back, and in the previous video, we got an introduction to Blueprint Visual Scripting. We talked about what it is and how it works. In this video, we're going to get our hands dirty and start working inside Blueprint Visual Scripting and create our first Blueprint script. So let's go ahead and get started. We are on the Unreal Project Browser window. We're going to create a brand new project for us for the purposes of this video series. We're going to make sure we're on the Blueprint tab, and we're going to use the third person template, just so that we have a playable character that will run around inside of our level. Then we're also going to make sure that starter content is enabled so that we have some assets to play with for future videos as well. And then we're going to choose a folder location to save it. And let's give our project a better name than my project. Just going to call mine Project Blueprint, like so. And then once you've done so, go ahead and hit Create Project. That's going to take just a second for it to create our project and open it up. Mine's actually loading off screen, so I'll drag it into view here in a moment. But what we're going to do in this video is keep things very simple as we start taking our first baby steps towards Blueprint Visual Scripting. We're going to create a simple script that will turn on a light inside of our level whenever we start playing our game. And in future videos, we'll modify this script so that we set it up so that when the player enters a room, it turns on the light. When they exit, it turns it off, eventually allowing the player to press a button to turn on or off our light, etc., as well as some other things a little bit later in this video series. But I wanted us to get started as quickly as possible with our first Blueprint script here. So we're going to keep things very simple in this video here. So we have our project open. We are currently on the third person example map. We want to use a brand new map for this. So let's go over to the File menu and let's create a new level. It's going to give us the new level dialog. We're going to use the default option here. So I'm going to go ahead and select the default map. That's going to open a brand new map for us now. And if we play in the editor here, you can see we have a character that runs around and we can control the camera. We can run around with ASWD and control the camera. So we have the makings of our level here. So to get started, let's build a simple room that we can place a light inside of. And then we'll turn that light on through Blueprint Visual Script. So to do that, let's hop down to the content browser down here. We're going to go up to the starter content folder and go to the architecture folder. So go ahead and double click, open it up. There's all kinds of static meshes in here for us to play with to construct our room. So let's grab this wall door, 400 by 300, just left click and drag that into the level like so. Now, if you are completely new to Unreal Engine 4, not just blueprints in general, but completely new to Unreal Engine 4, I wanted to give you a quick primer on how to navigate the viewport here. There are several videos for Introduction to UE4 Editor that you may want to check out, but if you are completely new, I figured I'd give you a quick primer on how to navigate the viewport here. If you hold down the right mouse button, you can control the camera inside the viewport. While holding down the right mouse button, if you hit W, you will move forward. If you hit S, you will move back. If you hit A, you will move left. And you hit D, you will move right. Q moves you down, and E moves you up. So as you are holding the right mouse button, you can use the W, A, S, and D keys to kind of move around like a first-person shooter. Just wanted to give you a little bit of an introduction to viewport controls, again, if you are brand new to Unreal Engine 4. So with that, let's take our piece here that we have placed into our level. This widget here that we are currently looking at is the translation tool. Allows us to move our widget or move our actor in any direction based on the arrow that we grab here. Let's go ahead. Let's position them kind of next to our player start here. So this is our player start. Let's put our door somewhere inside of our player start, something like that. You can see our door piece here is kind of off the floor a little bit. Quick little handy tip. If I move my piece way up into the air like so and I hit End on my keyboard, it's going to snap it down to the floor for us. So a quick little handy tip to snap things to floor pieces below your actors. So that looks pretty good. I think that's good enough. So let's go ahead and construct the rest of this room really quickly so that we can start working in Blueprint script here. I'm going to grab this wall 400 by 300. Just going to left click and drag that into our level. And with that piece inside of our level here, going to hit E on our keyboard. It's going to enter us into rotation mode. So just as before, you can grab any of these arcs and rotate the piece. We're going to grab this blue arc here and rotate it to the right so that it moves in that direction. So I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees like so. Then I'll go back to translation mode by hitting W on my keyboard. And now we can move this piece over and just line it up with the edge of our door frame there. So that looks good. So now that we have this one piece here, with it still selected, another shortcut, if you hold down Alt on your keyboard and you grab this red area here and drag it to the left, it's going to drag out a copy for us so that we have another copy of that piece. So we can drag it to the other side like so. It's kind of clipping into the wall a little bit, something like that. That looks good. We can do the same thing for this front piece here. We select it, we hold down Alt and grab this green arrow, just move it along to the back like so, something like that. Now this back piece has a hole in it. We don't want two door frames, so we can quickly swap this out. Down in the content browser, if we make sure that our 400 by 300 wall is still selected, if we go to the details panel now on the far right, under static mesh, you can see the one that we are currently using, the door frame. If we click this little arrow next to it though, it says use selected asset from the content browser. Go ahead and click it, and bam, it swaps out that piece for us. Now we have 4 walls, one of them with an opening. All we need now is our roof, and we'll be done with our little room here. So I'm going to hold Alt again and grab this blue arrow and drag a piece up into the air like so. Again, that nifty little shortcut, if I hit End on my keyboard, snaps it down for me like so. Then I'm going to hit E on my keyboard to go into rotation mode and grab this red arc here and just drag it down a little bit, 90 degrees like so. Now you can see this piece doesn't quite fit and line up to the edge here. We can hit R on our keyboard to enter scale mode. And just as before, we can grab any of these widgets and scale it in any direction. We're just going to take the blue one here and drag it to the left to extend it out just a little bit. And there we go. I think that's a good enough room to get started. Now all we need to do is add a light inside of here. So let's go ahead and do that. We can do that by going to the modes panel over here and make sure that we are on the basic tab. And there you go. Right there is a point light. We can just left click on it and drag and drop that into our level like so. And we can place it inside of our room. We can hit W to go back to translation mode, and we can kind of position it as we see fit. I think somewhere in the center like that. That should be good enough. Okay, so we have our basic little room with a light in it. Before we get started with Blueprint Visual Scripting, there's one thing that I wanted to point out. How do we turn this light on and off? We don't actually know. So if we go to the details panel, there's all kinds of settings for this light. We could change the light color, we could change its intensity, etc. Source, radius, all kinds of different properties. But if we scroll down a little bit and we go to the rendering section, so here's the rendering section, there's an option for visible. It's currently checked. If we uncheck this, watch what happens to our light in the level. It turns off. So this is the property that we want to affect through Blueprint script. This is the option that will turn our light on and off. So again, to keep things very simple, in this video, all we're going to do is turn this light on when the level begin or when the game begins. So by default, we want this to be off. We're going to uncheck it. And then through Blueprint script, we're going to turn it on. So now that we know what we want to affect, we want to affect this light, we know what option controls its visibility. Where do we get started with Blueprint script? Well, if we go to the toolbar at the very top, there's an option for blueprints. Click this button, and it's going to give us a bunch of different options. There's options for blueprint classes, which we'll talk about in a future video in this series. But basically, we can create a new blueprint class out of actually currently just create a new blueprint class entirely. But we can also take this light, this point light that we have selected, and turn it into a blueprint class with these options. Or we can open a blueprint class that we have previously created. Now, all of these blueprints here came with our starter content. So there's a bunch of different blueprints in here that came standard with our starter content that we haven't created, but we could access them here. We're not going to worry about any of these blueprint class options. We're going to hop down to the level blueprint section. Now again, level blueprint, as I mentioned in the previous video, is very similar to Kismet in Unreal Engine 3. Did want to reiterate, anything that you do inside of your level blueprint is going to be specifically contained within that particular level. So any script that we add here, if we open up a new level, all that script will go away because any script that you add to the level blueprint is self-contained within that level. So I just wanted to mention that. I think this is perfectly fine for us to get started. So go ahead and open the level blueprint. What that's going to do is open the Blueprint Editor interface. Let me go ahead and maximize it really quickly. So again, I'm assuming you are completely new to Blueprints. This is the first time that you are looking at the Blueprint Editor. So I wanted to give you a quick walkthrough of all the panels and all the things that are presented to you here inside of the Blueprint Editor interface. Probably the most noticeable or the most glaringly obvious panel is going to be this event graph. This is where you're going to be doing your visual scripting. You can see there's already 2 nodes here by default. All your connections and node-to-node connections are going to be done inside of the graph here, and that's going to provide the scripted functionality for our Blueprint. By default, there's a couple nodes here. Some quick navigation tips on how to navigate the graph here. If you hold down the right mouse button, that allows you to drag around inside and move around inside of our graph here. You can also mouse wheel down to zoom out or mouse wheel up to zoom in. And you can also hold down the left mouse button to create a selection box, so you can select several nodes, you can select individual nodes, etc. Those are the basic controls for navigating the event graph. Now directly above that is the toolbar. It gives us a bunch of different options, such as compiling, which we're going to need to do once we start creating our Blueprint script. We're going to need to compile it before we can play in the editor. We can also play in the editor and it will automatically compile for us, but traditionally, it's a good habit to just click the compile button to make sure that you compile before you play. Then there's an option for searching, so you can find various nodes or properties or variables inside of your Blueprint script. There's also class settings and class defaults. I don't really want to get into these too much. They're their own separate beasts, and I want to get into scripting as soon as possible, but properties for the Blueprint can be defined with these 2 options. And then we can play from here as well. So play in the editor. Now directly to the left of that is the My Blueprint panel. This contains all of the, if I go over the tab here, it'll tell us right there in the tooltip, contains all of the elements that belong to this blueprint. So any variables that we create, any macros or functions or anything that we create that pertains to this particular blueprint will be contained inside of the My Blueprint panel over here. And then on the far right, we have the Details panel. That allows us to change, like I mentioned, the class settings and class defaults. We can change properties of those 2 options inside the Details panel. Or any variables that we create, we can change its properties over in the Details panel as well. There's another panel that's currently missing from the Level Blueprint, which we'll talk about more in the Class Blueprint. There's a window that appears above the My Blueprint panel called the Components panel. And that is what allows you to add various aspects to your blueprint. So if you had that elevator blueprint and a class blueprint, like I mentioned in the previous video, you could have all the pieces that make up the elevator, which would be components, a button, the actual frame, the trigger box that makes it go up and down, etc. All those would be considered components, and they would reside inside of the components window. Not necessarily applicable to the Level Blueprint, but I do want to mention that. We'll talk about it more when we get to it in a future video. So let me minimize this because I want to get a view of our level and the Blueprint editor here. You don't have to necessarily do this, but I kind of wanted to show you something. Blueprint, when working inside of Blueprint, it's going to take contextual measures to kind of help you along, help you achieve what you are after. So right now we have the light selected in our level here. If I go back to our level and I hit escape, or not the tilde key, but I hit escape. So currently there's our light is selected. You can see in the Details panel it's selected. If I hit escape and we have nothing selected, inside of my blueprint here, the level blueprint, if I right click, you can see I get the option to add a bunch of the stuff for our Blueprint visual script. So we can add a bunch of different nodes to do all kinds of certain things. But how do I get started affecting that point light that we have in our level? We know that we want to turn this on and off. How do I actually affect that particular light? Well, if I select that light in the level and then right click in the graph, now we can see we have the option to access that particular point light. The level blueprint has recognized that we have the light selected, and Blueprint is saying, hey, do you want to do something with this light? Because you have it selected, let's try and do something with it. So it's giving us those options right there at the top that pertain to this particular light. Again, if I don't have anything selected in my level and I right click, those options are gone. But if I have it selected and I right click, now I have access to those options. So we can add events, we can call functions for the point light, etc. We're not going to worry about any of those. All we want to do is get a reference to this point light. we want to know through Blueprint Visual Script, what are we talking about? What point light are we talking about? So if we choose this, create a reference to point light, go ahead and select this. It's going to add a node to our graph. Now we know through Blueprint Visual Script that this particular node is talking about this particular light in our level. It even says it right here, point light from persistent level. So now that we know and we have reference to our point light, we know that we want to affect it and turn it off. What do we do next? How do we proceed actually? Well, again, Blueprint is going to try and help us. If we right click inside of our graph here, again, we can add events or functions or create reference to that point light, which we've already done. We can always add in any kind of nodes that we want from these options here. If you recall, before we opened up the level blueprint, I had you go to the details panel of this particular point light, and we went down to the rendering section and we unchecked visible. So we know this is the property that we want to affect. How do we get to it? Inside of the level blueprint here, if we right click again and we search for visible, you can see we have the option call function on point light 1, set actor hidden in game. So if we select this isn't necessarily what we want. You see it has added the node for us. It even added the reference for us. We don't necessarily want to set it hidden in game. We want to set its visibility. How do we turn that on and off? So let me select these two nodes and delete them. We can do so by dragging off of our point light here. So there's a pin here. If we left click and drag off of it, you can see it's telling us it's going to place a new node when we release the left mouse button. It's going to give us the context menu. And look at the very top. It says actions taking a point light reference. So now our menu is filtered to give us actions that only pertain to this particular point light. So everything that is in this menu is presented to us in a way that allows us to affect this point light in some manner. So now if we search for visible, or as we start typing, even as we start typing, if we enter in, say, VIS, for example, we get options for that rendering. We can check is visible, so we can determine if the light is actually visible or not. We can also set the actor hidden in game. We could set the visibility. But if we go down to the bottom here, we have the option for toggle visibility. And that sounds a little bit more like what we're after. Now there's two options here. There's toggle visibility light component, toggle visibility point light component. In this particular instance, either one of these will work, as both of these are going to get the light component associated with this point light, which is needed to turn the light on or off. We're just going to choose the toggle visibility light component here. And once you select it, it's going to add some nodes to our graph here. So it's added the toggle visibility node. It's also added a light component node here. And we now have the functionality to toggle the visibility of our point light, or the light component of our point light. So now that we have the ability to turn it on or off, what do we do next? Well, Blueprint has, again, offered up some suggestions to us. By default, there are two nodes that are here and grayed out. These two nodes are probably two of the more common nodes used in your blueprints, which is why they're here by default. The event tick is called every frame. So every frame when your game is running, whatever is connected to this node will get executed over and over and over again every frame. Doesn't sound necessarily what we want, so I'm going to select this and hit delete on my keyboard to delete that. But the one above it is event begin play. So event when play begins for this actor. So this is called when play begins, whatever is connected to this will get called and executed. That sounds a little bit more like what we're after. So I'm going to take this node and just drag it over here, left click and just drag it over. And I'm going to take this toggle visibility here and just drag it up just a little bit like so. And what we're going to do now is take the output pin, the executable here, just left click and drag and plug that into our toggle visibility. Now notice as I drag this over into the executable in here, I get a green check mark. However, if I tried to plug this into the target pin or even this Boolean pin here, you can see it says executable is not compatible with scene component reference or with Boolean. It's only executable with other executables. So I can only make the connection from one executable to another executable. So once we've done so, this node becomes highlighted, and we are now using the event begin play, and we have connected it to our toggle visibility. So I did want to mention one more thing before we test this out here. Notice the two color-coded wires here. This also, again, is Blueprint trying to tell us what is happening just from a visual standpoint and help provide some clarity on what connections are being made. So currently we are using an object connection here with this blue wire. So we're connecting object reference to our target here. And our executable wires are white. And there's other executable, or excuse me, not executable. There's other wires that are color-coded, such as vectors, transform, etc. We'll get into those a little bit later. Booleans example, if I drag off of this pin here, you can see I get a reddish or pink color. Just kind of Blueprint trying to help you visualize what's going on with your connections. So with our script currently set, we are saying when event begin play is called, whenever we start our game, this node will get executed. First thing it's going to do is hop over to our toggle visibility, and it's going to call this. It's then going to get the target that it's supposed to be affecting, which is our light component. And the light component is targeting our point light. So in essence, our light should get turned on when we play. So let's compile. And then let's actually hop over to the drop down here next to play, because I'm going to simulate this instead of actually playing. So I'm going to click this drop down here, and I'm going to go to simulate. So when I click this, in the background, our level will be simulated, our light will come on, but I want to simulate because I want to show you something else here really quickly before we wrap up this video. So if I hit simulate, boom, our light is on in our level, and also, you may have noticed it, the event begin play was fired and you can visually see it being executed. If I stop and I hit play again, watch these two nodes here. You can see that it gets fired and it's feeding into our toggle visibility and our light comes on. So let's stop. Let's actually click our drop down. And you know what? Actually, let's close this blueprint. I'm going to click the X mark here to close it. Click this drop down. And let's play in the selected viewport here. So you can see our light is on. Our player character is affected by our light. I think this is a good point to stop. We are 22 minutes in. We created our first blueprint script here. That's going to do it for this video. We have inside of our level blueprint, if I go back to our level blueprint here, created our first script to toggle the visibility of our point light that we placed in our level. In the next video, we'll turn this into a toggle so that the light can turn on or off instead of just on. That's going to do it for this video. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.